Hello and welcome to a Top 5 Friday that promises to be even weirder than usual. I'm your host Tim Cant, and this time I've used the power of my pulsating orbs to summon 5 of the freakiest plug-in synths around for your psychedelic pleasure. So without further ado, let's kick this freaky trip off. We're getting a portion of Torsion at 5. Poly KB3 is the magic number at 4. Synplant sows the seeds of grooviness at 3. Is there a doctor in the house? Symptomas at 2. And the booklet Ezel is painting with sound at the top spot. At 5, Torsion by Sine Vibes. This audio unit only plugin might appear to be pretty run-of-the-mill virtual analog with its 3 oscillators routed into a filter, but there's more to Torsion's oscillators than meets the eye. You start off with some simple waveforms and develop their harmonics to make them richer before you hit that filter. There's a bunch of modulation possibilities and effects in Torsion as well, with frequency shifting, filter FM, 4 LFOs and a chaos oscillator on hand to make sure your sounds are creative and original. Remember, this plugin's audio units only, so it's just for Mac users. Let us take a look at what makes Torsion tick. Now, this is billed as a hybrid synth. It's certainly got a virtual analog style filter there. I would consider it predominantly a phase distortion synth, and I'll show you what that means. So, currently we've got the default patch, only oscillator 1 is turned up at the moment, and it is set to a sine waveform, but you can see in the oscilloscope view, it's a bit more complicated than a sine. Why this is because our transformer depth is turned up. If we turn it down, it just goes back to a sine, and if we turn, you can hear that there, it's just a sine tone. If you turn the transformer depth up, the transformer model will kind of phase distort the oscillator and bring in more harmonics and make it richer before you whack it through that filter. So let's have a go. So there you go. Sounds a bit like FM, but it's a lot more simple. Let's try some of the other transformer models. That was a bit intense. That one's kind of laid back. And that guy's the fun one. Now, that's just working on the sine waveform. If we choose something with more harmonics right off the bat, for example, a sawtooth, we're going to get even crazier sounds. Let's give it a go. Whoa. This one. Crazy. Still quite gnarly. And tons of fun. So that's predominantly the main thing you need to know about Torsion. The other thing is how the modulation works. And it's pretty simple. Under each of the kind of major parameters, you've got these horizontal faders. They're color coded and the color shows what they correspond to. Red is your envelopes. Orange is the dedicated modulation source for each thing. And yellow is the chaos oscillator. So let's start by turning up what we'll do is you have to have the transformer depth turned up a bit for this modulation to work. So we'll turn up the built-in modulation source and hear how that sounds. And change the rate of it and the shape. There you go, very funky. And if you want chaos, you can bring in that too. So you can have all kinds of wonky weirdness there. And of course, there's 3 oscillators. The fun is adding more oscillators. Let's bring in oscillator 2. Let's go for, say, a pulse wave we'll go for the crazy one. Oh Lord. And what's cool is when you activate the ring mod, so for this, you've kind of got oscillator 1 is driving oscillator 2 for this. So if we turn down oscillator 1 and change the pitch course, there we go. And then we can modulate that. So, so yeah, and then you can add some distortion. Let's have some frequency shifting. And then when you whack the delay on that, clearly, you can get nice and tripped out. So for weirdness, Torsion has really got it in spades, guys. At 4, Poly KB3 by xils-lab. This recreation of a lesser-known analog synth has captured what made it so special. The RSF Poly Cobalt 2 offered us a way to morph between waveforms in analog before digital technology brought us the joys of wavetable synthesis. If you're after a great analog sound but don't just want to rehash the same old Minimoog architecture and workflow, Poly KB is well worth a look. For this recreation, xils-lab have added niceties like per voice modulation, a step sequencer with up to 128 steps and a choice of 16 destinations, plus 3D spatialization. It's analog, Jim, but not as we know it. Okay, fella me lasses, let's take a look at this analog waveform morphing. I mean, it sounds like it's going to be really cool and complicated. It's actually pretty simple. So we've got VCO1 active at the moment, that's the first oscillator. We play a note, we move the waveform knob, and it'll cycle, well, it'll morph between these various waveform shapes. Let's take a listen. Okay, so nothing too crazy. I mean, it's, you know, it's not bonkers compared to what you can do in a modern soft synth, but it sounds quite nice and analog, and also you can combine it with some other stuff that the synth does to come up with some interesting results. So what I want to do is I want to morph this waveform knob automatically with some modulation. You'll notice if I play with this region around here, we get a little bit of wonkiness that I quite like. So let's focus on that. So I'm going to use the wired mod panel. So this is the hardwired modulations. This first row is dedicated LFO1. I'm going to set that to modulate wave 1, so that's the waveform knob of the first oscillator. If you click it once, it's red, that means it's negative modulation. Click it again, green, positive modulation. Oh, there we go. So this is pretty drastic. What I'm going to do is I'm going to activate the restart so that the LFO restarts every time, and turn it down to the triangle shape. And now you can hear, we get an idea of our LFO rate, so that's the sort of thing we're after. We'll turn this up. Maybe that's still a bit too much. Oh, there we go. There we go. Now let's have a little play with this. That's kind of nice and lush sounding. Now another thing that I like about this synth that we're going to combine with that analog waveform modulation is its ability to use LFOs polyphonically. So we're not going to do that in the wired mod thing, even though you'll see that these poly mod things are set to ADSR2, VCO2. We're not going to use those. I want to use LFO2, so I'm going to set this to, where is it? LFO2 poly, there we go. And I'm going to route that to the frequency, filter 1 frequency cutoff. So we'll turn that down, we'll set this to positive. Oh, let's have a listen to that. Now this is currently set to a square waveform. I'm looking at something a little bit more siny. Oh yeah! So this is going to work polyphonically. In fact, I'll turn the amount down. It's going to work polyphonically. So we're going to have a dedicated LFO for our different notes. Now, that means that we can start one and then start another, and they can be like out of sync rather than there being just one monophonic LFO so that every note has the same filter movement on it. These are going to be slightly out of sync. Let's have a little demonstration of that. Oh yeah! And that's where you get that trippy freakiness coming from that is you can't really get with synths that don't do this polyphonic LFO stuff. Another thing we can do to make it even weirder is we could use a different source here, say keyboard follow, and we're going to route that to, let's go for LFO to frequency. So now, if we set that to positive, now different notes are going to add a bit of speed to the LFO separately. So essentially, long story short, each note is going to have its own LFO speed. So that's going to give us an even weirder kind of polyrhythmic thing going on when we play a broken chord like I'm about to now. And then we can muck about with the amounts. There you go, really lovely. If we want to get really freaky with it, all you have to do is turn up the resonance, whack all of the effects on, well, whack some of them on anyway, and let's hear what we got. Ooh yeah. Spacey vibes all day and all night, guys. So yeah, a really fantastic alternative to the more familiar virtual analogs out there. At 3, Synplant by Sonic Charge. Ever wanted to grow your synth patches like a plant? Of course you do, you're always going on about it. Well, with Synplant, you can do just that. Billed as a genetic approach to synthesis, Synplant has you planting seeds through 12 musical notes and using 4 main sliders to grow and evolve the whole thing into the perfect patch. It's not at all like the synths are used to. It's definitely not knob per function. It's a creative way of coming up with entirely new sounds. Synplant. The sinful plant. This is really kind of against everything that I stand for. I like to know where I am. I like predictability. I like things to make sense. With Synplant, things are a bit crazy. It operates in a way that is unlike any other synth that I've seen. I'm going to give you a quick run through. I'm not going to cover on absolutely everything because part of the joy of this synth is just mucking about, not really knowing what you're doing and creating weird stuff. So the deal is, you've got your Synplant here, and this has got like sort of 12 I don't know, stems that can come off, each assigned to a note. So if we play C, that's this, and we can make it, we can make it longer and shorter, and that'll change the sound. And if we play C sharp, that's a bit slightly different sounds. If we play G, that again is different. And the idea is that you grow these various thingies to the sort of length that you like, i.e. getting the right sort of sound that you like, and then you can play it like a patch. Let's just have a quick muck about. It's just weird. Do you know, this is a bit crazy, right? I'm not really feeling it, but the joy with Synplant is you just go new random seed and you can start from scratch again. Oh, and get something completely different. And this is kind of the beauty, but also for me, the scary part of it, because these are kind of like these ephemeral things that, unless you save your patch, of course, you know, are kind of, you know, sort of random. You can't really get it back. So let's just have another muck about with this patch. So weird. Oh, and you can also drag this. If you want to grow everything at once, you can drag this circle around, and you can also control that with the mod wheel. So let's just play about with this. So look, we've got this weird patch now. I'll play it on. So clearly, the sort of stuff. Not only you probably wouldn't come up with it if you were just mucking around. You probably wouldn't even think to do it. It would take ages as well. There's some tuning stuff here as well. There's an atonality control, which is like noise to like pitch sort of stuff. Release control, self-explanatory. Effect, that's like width essentially. Tuning, self-explanatory. I mean, sometimes stuff comes out a little bit wonky. Also, you can rotate this around so that each like stem sits on a different key. Weird stuff. And then if you find a sort of a stem that you particularly like the sound of, let's find one that I'm really into. Oh yeah, that's nice. What you can do is you can play God and do some genetic engineering. You do plant chosen seeds, and then it'll base this new patch on that particular stem, basically. So yeah, really weird. Oh, and I should point out, if you do want to go deep, you can open up this DNA thing, and then you can actually muck about with the sort of the synths parameters and stuff, and you can actually get it to tell you what's going on there. And doesn't it look gorgeous as well? So yeah, if you're into weirdness, guys, this is really as weird as they come. And number 2 is Symptome from Ohmforce. Want something wacky in left field? Yes, it's those Gallic gods of weirdness Ohmforce with an ageless terror from the deep. With a choice of regular and terrifying interfaces, synced granular oscillators, sub-oscillator with ring modulation, and a noise generator leading into the filter bank from Ohmforce's Quad Fromage, Symptome is a delight for those after a unique user experience. This plugin takes an age to properly understand, but thankfully there are loads of presets to get you up and running, and the meta patch Meloman section can be used to morph between presets, control the synth's LFOs, mutate presets, and much, much more. You might recognize this synth from back in the day, guys, if you're old enough. It's from the early mid-noughties, so it's kind of venerable. But hey, let me tell you, it has not been surpassed in terms of weirdness. Now, believe it or not, this is the acceptable face of the interface. There's 2 different versions of the interface. There's this one, which is merely intimidating. Then there's another one, which looks like a frickin' eldritch horror. So I've gone for this one. I'm not going to explain the synth architecture too much. It's kind of weird. It's based around these synced grain oscillators. There's 2 of those. This weird sub-oscillator, some noise. And everything's fed into this filter bank. Obviously, Ohmforce love their filters. There's some craziness going on in there. But what I really want to look at is this Meloman meta patch stuff, which is where I feel the synth is really interesting. So let's take a look at the browser. Now, as you can see, there's a ton of patches. But that is not the whole story, because for each patch, say we load Winds, which is kind of a generic patch I'm going to use to demonstrate the sound. You also have a choice of 12 different patches. Now, where the Meloman stuff comes in is you have this knob which does various freaky things to the parts. So for example, in morphing mode, you can use these key switches to swap between these 12 different patches. So there's number 1, number 2, oh, a bit more variation, number 3, and it gets increasingly trippy, and there's also morphing back and forth. So in this mode, the key switches, you have to hold them down to do anything, so it'll be like, so you get a kind of weird expression that you don't really get from other synths. I mean, it's not for everybody, but my god, yeah, if you're into freakiness, it's pretty cool. Let me show you, I don't want to spoil it, so I'm just going to show you one more mode. I'm going to go for mutate. So in this mode, it mutates the patch. Let's give it a go. Yeah. Craziness. Just weirdness. Yeah. If you like inexplicable cosmic horror, then Symptome is well worth checking out. And at number 1 is the booklet Ezel V from Arturia. Back in the early days of commercial synths, there were two competing synthesis styles: Moog's straightforward East Coast subtractive synthesis and the more esoteric West Coast approach espoused by Buchla. The Mini Moog style East Coast approach won out, and many synths have used this approach to their designs. However, recently, the West Coast philosophy has started to intrigue hardcore synth nerds. The Ezel is a classic example of West Coast design. It generates simple oscillator tones, which are then processed with wavefolding to produce more harmonic sounds. Other oddities include the low-pass gate module, which is essentially a filter, and the unusual 5-step sequencer. It's all emulated in expert fashion here by Arturia, that classic West Coast experience. Okay, I'm going to be real, guys. Buchla Ezel V is not the most easy to use synth in the world, to put it mildly. I've spent a few hours with it, I'm kind of getting to grips with it, but even, you know, disregarding the West Coast versus East Coast synthesis stuff, it's still really tricky. I think it was designed by wizards in the 60s, so it's, yeah, you know what you're getting with this. Look, straight up, if you want to make some filthy dubstep wobs in as quick amount of time as possible, do not get this synth. However, if you want to make some crazy retro noises and really want to get your teeth into something that is kind of like unusual and has a bit of a different flavor to contemporary soft synths, this is a great place to be. I'm pretty sure you've already made up your mind as to whether you're interested or not, but let's have a quick look at how it works. I'm not promising this is going to be smooth, guys, because this is confusing AF. Right, we've got a complex oscillator. This is what makes the basic sound, okay? So here we go. And there's kind of like a filter on it. Okay, so now we've got our triangle shape here. We can switch that to various other shapes, and we can change the timbre of these. So you get the idea. Now, we also have our modulation oscillator. It's not just for modulation, you can hear it as well. So for example, if we turn up its level, we can just hear it doing its thing. We don't even need to press a note. So what if we want to play both oscillators at once? It's the only way to get a sawtooth out of this thing. So we've got to set up some routing. So we've got to set the envelope. We're going to get the envelope out, which is from here. We're going to set this to the level. Now I think just doing this, I should be able to play two oscillators. There we go, wicked. We're going to turn oscillator 1 down. We're not going to turn down this level, because that'll just have it playing all the time. We're going to turn this one down, which is coming from the envelope. So here we go. We can now just listen to the modulation oscillator. Oh, there we go. That's a sawtooth. Okay, not so bad. You'll notice that the envelope stuff, it goes backwards to your regular Moog style. So if you turn it down, it takes longer. Yeah, this thing's a real piece of work. Okay, we're going to turn this oscillator back up. Oh, it does sound nice. I mean, I can't lie. And yeah, also with the modulation oscillator, you can turn up this modulation level and that'll do some FM, AM and balanced, which I think is like both of them. Oh, come on, do your thing. Oh, there we go. Let's see what we can do with this. And if, of course, we can change the pitch around. Oh, there we go. So let's get a bit of filth going on. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, some nice AM there. An underrated form of synthesis. Okay, let's detune those. Oh god. So yes, as you can hear, I'm dangerously close to veering into making an atonal mess. It is easy to do that with this synth. I'm going to quit while I'm ahead, and I will finish by saying, yes, this is a cool synth. But one that I would mainly recommend to hardcore synth heads. Well, it's back to reality, I'm afraid, because my orbs are spent. If you are looking for more mind-expanding plugin goodness, please click that subscribe button and the Tibetan prayer bell to join us next time. Namaste.